It's our community, and we're here to visit again. I like very much, if we have local authors, I always like to talk to them. And often it's their first book. In this case, it is. And Heather Snow is that local author. She writes romance novels. And the first one is called Sweet Enemy.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you.
You know, people are so interesting. Heather has a degree in chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
This is her first, we haven't ever written a book before, have you?
No.
And she entered a contest.
I did.
The Romance Writers of America. And it wasn't anything but just a manuscript, was it?
Right. Yeah. You enter the first 50 or so pages, and then you send them the completed manuscript. And then they judge it on the
So you only
opening
entered
chapters.
50 pages?
Yeah, the first 50 pages.
That's really interesting. And had you ever taken a class or done anything?
No, but when I joined Romance Writers of America, I actually, well, you know, being an analytical chemist person, when I decided I wanted to write romance, well, the first thing I did is I went to the library and got Romance Writing for Dummies.
Did you really?
I totally did. And, you know, it was an okay book, but the one thing I did get out of it was to join a professional organization, the Romance Writers of America. So when I did that, that opened up a lot of doors. They have all kinds of online classes, taped workshops.
And did you do some of that?
I did. I bought all of their taped CDs and just listened and learned, took some online workshops. I actually took my 6 favorite romance novels and analyzed them completely all the way through, so I could see how a story worked before I started writing.
Yours.
Oh, okay.
So I am watching you just like you watch them.
Yeah.
But you didn't win the contest.
I didn't.
However,
but I did final. So.
But you got to the finals, but you got somebody's attention.
I did, absolutely.
And how did they contact you? What did they say, or what happened?
Well, actually, I was submitting at the same time to get an agent. That's something I knew I wanted to do. And so I was submitting query letters. You sort of send them a pitch letter. And
to agents?
To agents, right. And so then once I had that Golden Heart finalist designation, that kind of got my query letter to the top of the pile. So I was contacting agents as well as the contest. And then the agent I actually chose found me in a different contest all at the same time. I mean, it all happened within a 2-day span.
So the planets all aligned.
It did. It was
time.
really strange.
Isn't that interesting?
So.
Well, Signet Eclipse published your Veiled Seduction novel.
Yes.
Quote, end quote. And Signet is a good publisher. They publish only paperbacks, I think, the Eclipse.
I believe the Eclipse line, and I'm not positive.
I think it's all paperback. I think so. But they're very substantial publishers.
Oh, they are, and they have a great history. They handle their authors very well. They know the markets really well. So.
And here you are, not a chemist, but a romance novel writer.
Yeah, absolutely.
The mother of 2 children.
I am.
So she, you know, that's the point that I think we ought to make. She's a really kind of normal person. She is not a Liliana.
No.
And I think that's important because, you know, when you see somebody like Heather, you think, oh, she's going to walk out in a flowered hat and a garden party dress, and she's not. She's a mother and a businesswoman.
Absolutely.
Really.
And especially today, with publishing ever changing, you have to be more and more business focused if you're going to make it as an author. So you have to educate yourself along those lines as well. It's not, you don't just get to sit and write.
Well, you may have bought romance novels for dummies, but you can't be a dummy and make money at this. You just really cannot. What made you decide to write? What got into you?
You know, I've always been kind of equally right and left brained. You know, when it came down to decide which direction I wanted to go with my education, I figured my career opportunities would be better served if I got the science degree. But writing has always been something I enjoyed. It was something that came sort of easily. I love to read. Avid
So you've
reader.
always written?
No. But like when I had to do papers or that sort of thing, it was something that was pretty easy for me to. I just sort of understood how to make it flow.
And you're a reader?
Avid reader. You know, reading very early. I started reading, I think about around 4. So I've read my whole life. And
well, see, that's a point we need to make too, that this stuff just doesn't pop up like a mushroom.
No.
You've been getting ready, really, for a long time.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think sometimes when you're a reader, you'll learn almost by osmosis. I mean, you sort of you kind of get a feeling for story structure just from reading it.
Well, I know that you were at the Linda Hall Library and got an idea for the plot.
I did.
Talk about that, because I think it's so interesting.
Oh, I went to an exhibit there. I love going there, and they had this fabulous exhibit on Napoleon's expedition to Egypt. And I was walking about all of the nifty things, and that he'd sent about 150 scientists to catalog Egypt. And so I was looking at all their findings and the different treasures that they found, and I was reading about how the British had to come in. He had abandoned them there, Napoleon. And so they just sort of wandered around the country for a couple of years just cataloging because they were stuck there. So, and then the British came and stole all the good stuff, the Rosetta Stone and all their findings, and sent them home. And so as I was walking along with my husband, I was like, hey, I wonder what would happen if one of these French scientists was able to smuggle something out with him. What would he do with it? And that's kind of how the story started. It just started playing around in my head, and my husband sat down and tossed back ideas. What if, what could it be? And it became that.
It became Sweet Enemy.
It did.
And and that piece of jewelry plays a major part, but not till the end, but it does play a major part. So how do you begin? Did you begin with the plot then?
I did in this particular book, just because I loved the idea of that. And so since it was scientists that had discovered the different things, I knew that whoever smuggled it out would have to be a scientist. And I started thinking about what kind of contacts he would have in Britain. So I then created another scientist character, but then it was a romance, so I needed a heroine. And so a lot of the books, if you read romance, a lot of the scientists happen to be men. You know, if anyone gets to be a scientist, it's the man, you know, the professor. So I decided to make her the scientist. And
well, but you've brought in, I'm accusing you,
Uh-oh.
Heather, you have brought in a lot of women's issues in this book.
Oh, absolutely.
So, you know, the fact that Liliana was a very substantial scientist, but was not allowed to enter the Academy of Sciences because she was a female.
Right.
She was turned down, and she kept trying, but
Yeah.
she was turned down. And the fact that she was so non-traditional as a woman of her time, and the setting, the time period is, what,
1817. just
1817.
Post-Napoleonic War.
Yeah,
So.
see. So she's way ahead of her time.
She is. I mean, there were definitely women practicing in the time.
Is there any part of you in her?
Oh, absolutely. I think any author that says there's not part of themselves in any character, even the villain, you know, is
Absolutely
disingenuous. You know, you really do. It's actually amazing as you're writing to find out how much of yourself comes into the character.
Sometimes you might not notice it till you reread it.
Till you read it, absolutely.
Isn't it? Any part of your family, your husband, your children?
Not so much in this one. I think maybe in
So you're
further
not married
novels.
to Jeffrey?
No, no.
Well, the characters are very important, and Liliana and Jeffrey are the two major characters, and the love interests, and sometimes they are in opposition to one another.
Absolutely.
Now, the names. How do you go about? I mean, the names give you a whole lot of clue sometimes as to what you want to convey to the reader. How did you decide on the names? Jeffrey Wentworth and Liliana Claremont.
Right. Well, first I sort of went back in the time and looked at names, you know, traditional English names of the time, and picked several of them, and then sort of played through them to figure out which ones I liked. Jeffrey's name was probably more significant because it's not very typical, and he's not a very typical hero. You know, he's very. He came back from the war with a purpose, and he was sort of fighting against his place as much as Liliana was fighting against her place, and you know how society viewed they should act. And so I wanted to give him a name that wasn't completely typical and was sort of a little more laid back, because he was that way, and he would have to be able to love Liliana, who is very strong.
Yeah, but he was ahead of his time too, as far as his attitude toward women and her and what she did. I mean, he was very accepting of what
He
she
was,
did.
and I think, and that was one of the main reasons I made him the war hero that I did, because I think he had to go through, to be raised in that aristocratic environment, and then to go through a change that would make you see people for more who they are instead of the world that you've been presented with. So he had to go through some
was,
things.
as we say, high-born, and not,
Right.
and in the position in which he was born, he was not likely to be sympathetic with the lesser
Right.
folks.
Right. But when you spend, a dozen years fighting side by side with them, and you see that people are people, that changed him fundamentally, and that made him the right sort of hero for her. I think if they'd have met 5 years ago, 10 years ago, there's no way they would have been together.
Well, and there's a scene where she rides his horse, and they're in the barn with the man that takes care of the stable, and evidently that man was in the war with
him.
Jeffrey. And he said to him, I forgot exactly what the conversation was, but he said, well, it would be fine with me if you called me Jeffrey. When the man said, no, I couldn't do that. He said, well, you can call me Stratford. See,
Right.
but he already has a tie with this man, even though their social status
Right.
is so different. So you made that clear.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that was fundamental to his character. So.
And in the description of them, see, what I'm leading up to is holding the people to the book so they don't throw it away and say, this is not interesting.
Right.
See, all these things are very important. How you name the characters, who they are, what status in life they have, and you describe them beautifully. Your descriptive
Oh, thank you.
writing is very good, I think.
Thank you.
I mean, for whatever it's worth, I think. I do.
I appreciate anyone that reads it and enjoys it or doesn't enjoy it.
I did. I
so.
did. But the descriptions that you use of them are very important. And you're very careful to talk about the color of their eyes, the color of their hair, the way they dress, their bodily structure, their muscles, their attributes as females. I mean, you're very descriptive of all of them. And the time period. How did you, let's talk about research when we talk about the time period.
Sure. Well, again, we talked about learning by osmosis, and so I've read historical romance, for years and years. So you sort of pick up a lot of that just from reading, and then I've read a ton of research books as well. And just history books.
How long did it take you to get ready to write the book?
This specific book?
The research.
I would say probably a good 6 months.
See, that's a lot of reading.
Yeah. But that was also learning the craft of writing. The second book obviously didn't take me as long because I sort of knew what I was doing. So, but I knew, like I said, I knew a lot of it, and then I did a lot of research about where in England I wanted to place them. Because of Jeffrey's life goals and the things that he wanted to do, I had to make sure that mining was possible, and I had to do a lot of research about where I would place them, and I had to do a lot of research about the chemistry of the time, what Liliana would know, what her goals would be.
We're going to talk about that because
I think
that's extremely interesting.
So.
But if you make a mistake in the furniture or the costumes or the whatever you hear about it immediately, so you lose credibility if you make a mistake in setting up the set, the scenery, as I call it.
Right, you do.
That's really important.
And you do make mistakes, but you try really, really, really hard not to. So.
Well, and you've inserted information in the book too that's interesting because you talk just a little bit about the war that he participated,
right.
And you might talk about that just a little bit, what war he was in.
He was in the Napoleonic Wars, so they ranged for dozens of years.
Oh yeah.
At least more than a dozen, I think 14, 15 years all over Europe. So.
How many pages do you think you have to capture the reader? I'm going to say 20.
They say with the attention span of today's reader, if you haven't captured them in the first 2, you lose them.
Really?
Yeah, it's really scary.
Well, that brings me to a very interesting question then. Immediately, the first passionate kiss was delivered. Almost immediately. When she went into the library at night, fell off the ladder, and he caught her. I mean, the stage was set.
It was
at that point, and I forgot what page that was on. Maybe 4
that's
or
actually
5.
in mine. That's in chapter 3, so it's a little further along in the book.
Was that further along? I can't remember, but I hadn't read very much when I saw that.
Right.
One night.
And I originally didn't have that happening there. I had it happening later, but I realized that I needed to set up because we were about to go into the mystery part of it and the push-pull between them. So I kind of had to set up that attraction fairly early on. So.
Well, and the book, I mean, after all, is a romance novel. So I guess that first kiss is very crucial.
It is, and readers wait for it. I mean, they anticipate it, and they, romance readers too.
What is it? Pursuit and seduction are the essence of sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it makes the book kind of sizzle. You're wonderful with adjectives. Let me just
okay.
quote here. You said, Genevieve Wentworth, that's Geoffrey's mother.
Mm-hmm.
Lady Stratford sat serenely on a floral chaise near the fireplace, as if he'd politely dropped in for tea instead of racing at breakneck speed to answer her urgent summons. I mean, to me that tells me a lot about the mother-in-law to be.
Yes.
And let's see, there's another one here that I want to. And she says, Geoffrey, darling, do sit down, she says, and she indicates an antique caramel settee across from her. So you're big with those adjectives.
Mm-hmm.
And don't you think that helps me to get into the...
That's what I'm trying to do. Historical romances of the past tended to spend paragraphs and paragraphs kind of describing dresses and scenes and rooms, and a lot of people love to read that, but again, the attention span of today's reader is not what it used to be. So you try to drop in things within an action, within where it's not overwhelming, but you still set that scene.
Mental pictures.
Mm-hmm, yeah,
mental
you want to give them
pictures is
mental
what you're
pictures.
Doing. Here's another one. They're talking about the house. A columned temple-like portico dominated the front, forceful and proud. See, those are powerful words.
Thank you.
Like the rest of the house, it enunciated the wealth and power of the Wentworth family. Mm-hmm. See, you're giving me all kinds of clues,
right?
I think, as we dissect your book.
That's fine.
And here's Geoffrey Wentworth. Black hair complemented winged brows of the same hue. The aquiline nose lay above long, full lips that Lothario himself would envy. Isn't that wonderful?
Yes, it is. Thank
yeah,
you.
Come to think of it, she says it is. But those are
it.
things that give me a mental picture and keep me going in that book.
Right.
I mean, I think. You talk about exciting times because she's a chemist. She learned from her father. She's a non-traditional woman with a non-traditional job, non-traditional education.
Mm-hmm. I
mean, she just is way ahead of her time. And the 18th and 19th centuries are big for chemistry. There were a lot of things happening.
Absolutely. The chemical revolution started late in the 1700s. And so they were really redefining how they experimented with things, how things came together. They were really trying to go away from some of the ancient Greek that had been passed down and really starting to see things for what they were.
Very well.
Right. I mean, there was definitely truth in it. I mean, they were on the right track, but it was really the end of the 18th century that it started to break.
Well, and let's talk about the medicinal part, because Liliana was a healer,
mm-hmm.
and she used holistic methods. I mean, she used plants and all that kind of. And one of the things she was working on from willow bark, she was trying to extract salicylic acid, which we all know is the basis for aspirin.
Right.
So you do a lot of research, because you get caught if you make a mess
Absolutely.
of it.
Absolutely.
That's
this. That author's note in the back of the book that says, yes, this actually was about to happen, and it could have happened. You kind of really explain
that. You're trying to cover your bases.
So absolutely.
Yeah. Well, so what kind of research did you do? And we're talking about 1817, right around in there.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I had to look at what I wanted her character to be, but also sort of what she was striving for. So in my mind, she was kind of the precursor of a biochemist. She sort of understood, and at the time they did understand that there was chemistry going on in the body, even though they hadn't been able to define it. They were really starting to understand that, chemistry in the body and chemistry in plants. They just didn't know how to put it all together. And she doesn't know how to put it all together either. She just knows that it can be, and she's striving to figure it out. And actually, just a few years later, a man, several different men about the same year, were able to extract the salicylic acid. And
she came out of the closet, as it were, as a chemist when Jeffrey and I can't think of the man's name.
Aveline.
Aveline they had games at this house party that everybody went to seek a husband.
Yes.
I mean, it was a 2-week house party.
Yes.
And that's a long time to. Anyway, that's what they did in those days.
Right.
And she didn't want to go. She was looking for information to see who murdered her father. I mean, you know, the plot begins to thicken here. And they were playing games, and she said to Aveline, I can fix it so you can win. She put a little sugar in the gunpowder.
She did.
And it fires faster, so he was able to win. But in doing so, and in coming out of the closet,
Drew a lot of attention to
the women
herself,
were
yeah.
appalled and horrified at this lovely house party, this garden party, and where we flutter our fans and wear our hats and look for a husband, and she wasn't doing that.
No, and it actually made it worse for her because she was trying to stay sort of under the radar, and that drew a lot of attention to herself.
She couldn't help it.
She couldn't help it. Yeah, you can't get insulted and then just, you know, walk meekly away. So.
That's right. That's right. But I think it's important to note that as much as she wanted to get in the Royal Society of Scientists, the first woman was not admitted until 1945.
Right.
I mean, that's a long time from
It is.
1817.
It is.
Okay, now you begin to tangle the threads. We're at the house, and she really isn't interested in finding a husband, but by golly, Jeffrey spots her immediately, and they have this mad, passionate kiss, and they, no matter how crossways they got of each other, they never did not have this attraction.
Right.
Now, tell me how you put this together so it flows, so that I'm not in the middle of the thing and I think, what's happening here?
Right. Well, actually, knowing a lot about brain chemistry, it was kind of easy to have that physical attraction completely opposite of what both of them wanted in their rational lives.
No, neither of them.
You know, and we now know that, you know, you can be attracted to your mate by scent alone. You know, we are attracted to people who have the opposite
the pheromones.
Pheromones, yes, but also that have the opposite genealogy as us. We sniff out immune systems basically, so that we can have healthy children who are covered, you know, on their immune system. So it was easy to keep that physical attraction going on, even though both of them were trying to pull the other way and say, "Oh no, no, wrong for me," you know.
Well, the whole house party was set up by Jeffrey's mother because she decided, what was he, 34?
I think I don't remember, like 31, 32, somewhere
yeah, something like that. And she decided it was time for him to get married. So she invited all of the eligible ladies, and we're talking about high-born, wealthy, and Liliana was not acceptable. And she came because her aunt and cousin were invited.
Right.
So they dragged her along, as it were.
Right. Well, and Jeffrey would have walked away, but she also, clever mother-in-law that she was, invited political allies that he needed, and you know, a lot of politics was done over the billiards table at these house parties, and so he kind of knew he was stuck at that point if he wanted to push through Parliament his goals, you know. So.
Which was to help others. It's back to where we were talking about when you set the stage for his character, that you wanted an empathetic kind of person in him, and I guess a changed man.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and the type of man that would be able to be with someone like Liliana. I mean, if he, like I said, if he was the man he was born to be, they would have nothing in common.
No. So. Well, and he kept saying, you know, she just won't do. She can't help me to get my bills through Parliament. She can't. So I can't look at her. But boy, all the while.
Yeah.
I mean, it's you just keep. I call it. You keep putting condiments in the plot there of love and seduction.
Right.
And that keeps people interested, I will say. Bad behavior. They considered her behavior, her colleagues at the party considered her behavior bad.
Right.
Bad. And it was outrageous for the time.
For the time, absolutely.
How outrageous did you feel safe in making her? Or did you think about it?
I did think about it. You know, I thought about her familial bonds. You know, being an orphan, you know, she only has her aunt and uncle and cousin.
And they didn't think too much of her because she was so different.
She was different. I mean, they tried to make her into the person that they thought she should be. So, you know, there was some strife there. But she has a lot of love for her cousin. And so, she wouldn't step too far out of line because she wouldn't want to taint her cousin by reputation. And back then, you know, reputation was everything. You could not do something wrong and just be
It
perceived
meant-
that
it
you did
meant
something
a
wrong.
future, a
Yeah,
marriage
absolutely.
for these women.
Absolutely. And, you know, her cousin was protected being higher born, you know, so Liliana would have had to have done something pretty rotten to taint Penelope, but still it was a possibility. So, you know, and she didn't want to be totally ostracized. She just didn't want to take part of the society as it was.
Well,
So-
and after he got over the shock, I mean, he was attracted to her immediately. And after he got over the shock of her outrageous behavior,
Right.
he was always attracted to her as strongly as she to him. You never let that slip, no matter how crossways they became with each other. And at one point she says, "Enemy, thy name is Jeffrey."
Right.
She was so irritated with
Right,
him.
right.
But you never let us forget that attraction was always there.
Well, and I tried subtly to deepen it, I tried to take it from the physical into what it was. As they're saying, oh, he's wrong for me, she's wrong for me. They're really starting to see how underneath it all, they're perfect for each other. They're really right. They have the same kind of goals. You know, they come at them from different directions. But so I took it from the physical to the emotional and the mental, and the realization that this would be someone I could make a life with. So
And it did dawn on him and on her,
yeah,
finally. I mean, but they had some pretty
they did. That's sweet enemy
involved
for a
times,
reason.
let's put it that way. I thought, oh my, really?
Yeah.
But it always, through it all, they always had, I think, a healthy respect for one another, which is really important in a good relation. You never let that slip.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's vital. You know, if I read a book where people didn't respect each other, I wouldn't find it genuine. You know, one of the things I love about romance is that it really does promote personal growth, character growth, monogamous relationships, and respect. You have to respect yourself. You have to respect your partner, or it's not going to work. And if I don't finish a book and feel hopeful and happy, and then it wasn't a good story for me. So.
See, I believe that when you look at a book like this and you say, oh, it's a romance novel, big deal, there are a lot of life's lessons in here.
Absolutely.
That if you read the book and think about it a bit, there are some very good lessons that come out, and perhaps you can reach somebody through this that you couldn't reach in any other way.
Absolutely.
So I think that's kind of
They're
an
all
interest-
about characters. I mean, the best romances are all about the character and their growth. So,
Yeah. So I know that there is a next for you,
yes,
and it's called Sweet Deception.
it is.
And I said to Heather, in neither of these books did they show the top of the heads of these nice ladies. But Sweet Deception, I like this green dress too, and it's coming
Beautiful.
out where?
It comes out August 7th.
All this.
So.
Now, I bought this book at Barnes & Noble. Other people can do the same if
Yep.
they're interested. And I know that romance novels have a large following, so
They do.
I hope you do well.
Well, thank you.
And Sweet Deception is coming out. It's another veiled seduction novel.
Right, there's 3 of them coming.
Oh,
so
is the third one in process?
it is. I'm in the process of writing it
In
right
the
now.
throes of.
Yes, I am.
Yes. Ambrose Bierce said something kind of interesting. He said, romance is the fiction that owes no allegiance to the God of things as they are. In the novel, the writer's thought is tethered to probability, but in romance, it ranges at will over the entire region of the imagination.
Absolutely.
And I thought, you know, that is really what Heather is trying to say.
Oh,
I
like that.
liked
I'm
it.
gonna have to look that quote up.
You know, and I read a lot too.
Mhm.
And I thought that in this novel there were some very important things that popped out, and I tried to pull those out. And I would recommend to you that you might enjoy it. There are a lot of people that wouldn't,
Sure.
and that's okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Because that's why books are wonderful. There's something for everybody, and Sweet Enemy is a very interesting, I think, book. And I'm here to tell you that Heather Snow is a very interesting lady, and she lives in our community, and I think it's so important to let all of us know that we are so fortunate to live in this community with so many interesting people. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for being with us. It's our community, you know, and I'll see you soon again.